Hey, it's Brewbird. In this video, we're going to the Shakespeare Distillery where we'll be fine-tuning our rum making process. This is also the final journey into rum video. So, let's go!
E tudo vai ficar bem.
This is the final video in the Journey into Rum series here at the Shakespeare Distillery. So if you'd like to watch the production process from the beginning, I've left the links in the description below. So in the previous videos, we fermented a molasses wash in our iStill 2000 liter fermenter, and then distilled the wash in batches in our still. After the distillation, the low wines had a slightly sulfury, burnt, and plasticky flavor. These negative flavors were removed during the second distillation and we were left with a pleasant white rum, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement in our production process. So let's go over some of the changes we made later on. After the third Journey into Rum video was posted, Simon, the owner of the Shakespeare Distillery, received an email from the founder of iStill himself, Odin, who gave us some advice on how to produce our rum with the iStill. So it just goes to show that you never know who's going to watch your videos on YouTube. One of the first things he said is that we never have to use any cleaning agents when cleaning out the iStill fermenter. All we need to do is rinse it with water using a pressure washer. That sure makes life easier. In the first video, you saw us sticking our hose into the top of the molasses IBC, which we only did because the fitting didn't arrive in time. Now that our CAMLOCK fitting has arrived, we can attach the hose to the bottom of the IBC and allow gravity to do most of the work in moving the molasses out of the IBC and into the pump. So please admire this simple, clean, and stress-free transfer of molasses into the fermenter. In our first large-scale fermentation, we brought the water up to a temperature of around 34 degrees Celsius before we added in the molasses. We tried to use the heating element in the iStill to heat up the water, but that took 4 hours to do, so it didn't seem like a good long-term solution. Later on, we just heated up some water in the iStill and then pumped it over into the fermenter. Also, instead of aiming for the water to be 34 degrees Celsius, we only aim for it to be 20 degrees Celsius, since during fermentation, heat is produced and the temperature of the molasses wash will gradually rise on its own. Odin said that we should try not adding any citric acid to our molasses wort to see how it would ferment. Our reasoning for adding the citric acid was that during our small-scale rum tests, we enjoyed the taste of the spirit more when the starting pH of the molasses wort was lower. The citric acid was added to the molasses wort to lower the pH, making the wort more acidic to begin with. While this worked out well in our small rum tests, the flavor of the rum when we scaled up our production was extremely different from what was produced in the small tests. That's only to be expected though, since we did our small tests using copper alembic stills, while our large-scale distillations were done on an iStill, which is primarily made of stainless steel. It just goes to show how important the type of still is in impacting the final flavor profile of the spirit. While we were racking our brains about how to improve our production process, I thought to myself, you know what would be really helpful? If we could talk to another English distillery that's also using molasses and iStill equipment to make their rum. I went on Google and found a distillery that fit this criteria. After I uncovered the name of that distillery's head distiller, I went on LinkedIn and sent him a message asking for help. Later, we chatted for half an hour on the phone, discussing the production processes of both of our rums. Interestingly, he also does 2 distillations to produce the rum there. He was also surprised that our starting specific gravity of the molasses wort was so low, and he suggested that we try a higher starting specific gravity, closer to 1.070 or 1.080, to increase our alcohol yield. So just a quick refresher on what specific gravity is. It's a ratio of the density of a substance to the density of a standard substance, in this case, water. So increasing the starting specific gravity of the molasses wort means that we're making it even more dense than water. How do we make it more dense? Well, we just add in more molasses. Adding in more molasses means we have more fermentable sugars. And more fermentable sugars means that we'll produce more alcohol. And more alcohol means that ultimately we'll have more product to sell. So you can see why it makes sense, business-wise, to keep trying to get a higher and higher starting specific gravity. In our first large-scale distillation, we had just one single copper waffle, which we stuck up into the still. We happened to have some copper packing material lying around the distillery, so we decided to put all the extra packing material we had in a small muslin bag, which we tied to the base of the column along with the single copper waffle. Now after each distillation, we take out all the copper, clean it, and then put it back in the still before starting the next distillation. The iStill has a lot of different functions and modes on it, so David is always tweaking the settings on the iStill to see if that will make a difference. One of the things he discovered is that you can set the pot of the iStill to preheat to any temperature you would like. So when he comes in the morning now, he can start collecting the spirit right at the start of his shift instead of waiting around for the still to heat up. There was a lot of discussion about whether the solids in the wash were sticking and burning to the heating elements in the still, and if this was the main cause of the negative flavors we noticed. I thought a possible solution would be to open the bottom valve on the fermenter to flush out any dead yeast cells or other solids in the wash that had settled at the bottom of the fermenter. We tried to do this once, and what I expected was a very thick and sludge-like liquid to come out of the bottom. But it was clear by the consistency of the liquid that the yeast was still suspended in the wash. I guess we could have added in a fining agent like Turbo Clear to the wash, which would remove the majority of yeast cells, solids, and other unwanted compounds from the wash, but we never quite got around to trying that out. We also wondered whether it was necessary to invest in an agitator system that we'd put inside the still. The agitator would keep the liquid in the still moving throughout the distillation to prevent any solids from sticking and burning onto the heating elements. But after eliminating the citric acid from our recipe and changing some settings on the iStill, we noticed a big improvement in the flavor of the spirit. So now there's no real need to invest in an agitator system anymore. All of these changes simplified our rum making process, and while these changes produced a better smelling and tasting spirit after just one distillation, we all agreed that the spirit still tasted best when it was distilled twice rather than once. So while the iStill is advertised as being able to distill a great product after just one distillation, for our rum production process, we've decided to stick with 2 distillations. Although David is constantly adjusting the settings on the iStill and making small changes to see if, in the future, we can get this down to just 1 distillation. You might be wondering though, if we're constantly making changes to our production process, such as adjusting the settings on the iStill, won't we be in danger of changing the character of the white rum too much from batch to batch? Yes, that could happen. But we're not only producing a white rum. We're also working on a spiced rum too. So if the taste of one batch of white rum is significantly different, we can always set that batch aside and turn it into spiced rum later on. I hope you enjoyed watching the production process of our British white rum from start to finish at the Shakespeare Distillery. This is also the final video at the Shakespeare Distillery, so I'll see you at the next distillery. And in the meantime, if you could give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more distilling and distillery videos, that would be very much appreciated. So, this is Brewbird sending good vibes your way. I'll see you next time.